Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again on this beautiful Shabbat day. If I asked people if they recognize the name Jacob Chansley, the chances are most of you will have no idea who I'm talking about. Yet, unless you have been living under a rock or on Mars for the past 3 weeks, you would without doubt have seen him on TV, all over the media, printed media, here in Canada as well as the United States, Europe, and certainly on such social media as Facebook. And the reason being is that Jacob Chansley is probably one of the most visible symbols of the violent uprising against the US government that took place in Washington on January the 6th. Now, Chansley is the QAnon supporter who was decked out in the face paint, in the tattoos, in the fur, with the horns and the flag. Now, of course, you know who I'm talking about because you couldn't have missed that picture. And he was in court. He was in court this week. And Chansley claimed in his defense that he was answering the call of the former president. And that was his defense to his arrest. And his lawyer said that Trump's words meant something to my client and a lot of other people. At the same time, a Honolulu lawyer said much the same thing of his client, Nicholas Ox, who was arrested for breaking into the Capitol. And the lawyer said that his client doesn't deserve full blame for what happened, but the finger should be pointed directly at Trump and his acolytes who encouraged Ox and the others to lay siege to the Capitol. Is that a real defense? I was just following orders. Is that a defense? We Jews know much better than anyone else what I was following orders really means, and that it is not a defense for the morally indefensible. In 1962, after he was convicted and sentenced to death, Adolf Eichmann, Yamach Shemo, wrote a letter to Israeli President Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, pleading for a pardon. And Eichmann wrote, there is a need to draw a line between the leaders responsible and the people like me, forced to serve as mere instruments in the hands of such leaders. Eichmann went on to argue, I was not a responsible leader and such do not feel myself guilty. Now, as we all know, Eichmann's plea was rejected and he was executed for his crimes. I was just following orders is a common defense in such circumstances. It's called superior orders. And so many defendants have tried, do try, and will try using it. It became really famous in the Nuremberg trials. That's why it's also known as the Nuremberg defense. But it's much older than that. And it's been fairly consistently rejected throughout history. The oldest recorded use of the defense was in 1474. Now, Peter von Hackenbach, who was a German knight who served as an administrator in the Upper Rhine region, was a tyrannical ruler. And he brutally put down a revolt. And while he wasn't personally engaged in the acts of violence, he was found guilty of murder, rape, and perjury because of the actions of his troops. And his defense was that he was only following the orders of the Duke of Burgundy. The court rejected that and said there is no excuse, and they had him beheaded. There's also a subtle difference between following orders in the order of, in the order, if the order itself is illegal, and following orders if the order is legal, but yet it is immoral. And Judaism is very big on obedience to the law. In fact, there is a halachic principle, as I've quoted many times, and I do it again today, which is the principle of Dinah de Malchuta Dinah. The law of the land is the land. And the rabbis tell us that this is halakha. So if you disobey a civil law, you are also disobeying halakha. So in theory, speeding becomes not just a civil offense, but a religious offense as well. So the question one, of course, has to ask is, do we blindly obey all laws? And the answer, obviously, is no. Eichmann didn't do anything illegal according to German law in effect at the time. He was only obeying orders. But he was obedient to the national law. And that still was no defense. It is indeed possible for an entire country to go down an evil path and have laws that must be disobeyed. But how do you tell the difference between an order you should obey and an order that you should disobey? Now, American soldiers disgracefully murdered innocent civilians in the My Lai massacre in Vietnam in 1968. This is something that we were taught about in officers training school, and something that Elizabeth and I and the kids saw at the museum when we were visiting the Museum of Freedom, I think it was called, in Ho Chi Minh City when we were there last summer. One of the soldiers charged tried using the just following orders defense, and the Court of Military Appeals ruled the jurisdiction for acts done pursuant to orders does not exist if the order was of such a nature that a man of ordinary sense and understanding would know it to be illegal. In 1956, this is probably one of the blights upon Israeli society. In 1956, 48 Arabs from the Israeli Arab village of Kafr Qasim were killed by the Israeli border police when they were returning home after work during a curfew that they didn't know existed. The border policemen involved were brought to trial, and each of them was found guilty. And the judge said, the distinguishing mark of a manifestly illegal order is that above such an order should fly like a flag, a warning that is saying prohibited. Illegality that pierces the eye and revolts the heart. If the eye is not blind and the heart is not impenetrable or corrupt. Someone posted a guide that could be used in situations such as the one unfolded at the US Capitol on January the 6th. In a divided world where everyone thinks that they are right, and everybody has an opinion, and everybody's opinion is right in their eyes, how do you tell which side is right? And the suggestion is that the presence of Nazis can be a helpful indicator. And this is what somebody wrote. If I am attending a local demonstration or event and I see Nazis, neo-Nazis, casual Nazis, master race Nazis, or the latest whatever uber mythology Nazis, I can figure out which side they are on. And if they are on my side of the demonstration, I am on the wrong side. It is tough to argue moral equivalence when I am standing next to a Nazi. Look to my right. Is there a guy wearing a 6MWE, 6 million wasn't enough t-shirt? I am on the wrong side. Look to my left. Is that guy wearing a Camp Auschwitz t-shirt? Wrong side. Are speakers being applauded for referring to things that Hitler got right? Wrong side again. If you see someone decked in face paint, in tattoos, in horns, covered with animal skin, that's a somewhat ambiguous sign, but I'd stay away from them, even at a hockey game. If you use the following orders, concept, does it matter who's giving the orders? Ex-President Trump was the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military on January the 6th. If he'd tell his supporters they should go to storm the Capitol, can't they rely on that? Commander-in-Chief? Well, the Torah would tell us absolutely not. In this week's Torah reading, Parshat Bo, we are commanded, Torah achat yihiyeh le'ezrach v'lager hager b'tochachem. There shall be one law for the citizen and for the stranger alike who dwells among you. In the book of Bamidbar, the commandment is yet again repeated. Torat achat u'mishpat echad yeh lachem v'lager hager be'ezrach. The same ritual, the same rule shall apply to you and to the stranger who resides among you. Everyone is subject to the same laws. All are equal under the law. And the Torah also specifically applies the law to a king. Kings are commanded to carry a Sefer Torah with them so that they would be reminded that they too have to follow the law. The Torah also cautions us against blindly following a charismatic leader. Found in the book of Devarim, we are told, listen to it carefully, if there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner and he gives you a sign or a portent, saying, let us follow and worship another God, whom you have not experienced, even if the sign or the portent that he named to you comes true, do not heed his words. Do not heed the words of that prophet or that dream diviner. For the Lord your God is testing you to see whether you really love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. My friends, understand one thing. People have always been drawn to charismatic leaders. They say that in the 16th century, a fourth of the world's Jews believed that Shabbat Tzvi was the Mashiach, who was the Messiah. In the 18th century, Jacob Frank claimed that he was the reincarnation of Shabbat Tzvi, and many Jews followed him into acts of heresy, neglecting the commandment of the Torah not to follow a false prophet. There are people who today blindly follow a rabbi. Even when to any observer the rabbi is going down a bad path. You all here in Quebec will remember that just a few years ago we had that cult, the Lev Tahor cult, headed by the late Rabbi Shlomo Helbrans. It's been called the Jewish Taliban, because of their practices of women being covered from head to toe and forced marriages of teenage girls to men 20 plus years older than themselves. You may remember them. They settled here in Quebec, and then they fled Canada when the government moved in. And where did they go? They headed to Guatemala in 2014. That was after the government succeeded in taking 6 children away from them and placed in foster care. Secular law, halakha, and ethics all expect us each to have a functioning moral compass. I was following orders is not a defense. Yes, there will always be gray areas, but in extreme cases, there should be no question that when a person must take a stand and not blindly follow a charismatic leader or blindly follow a blatantly immoral law, that is what is expected to do. It doesn't matter whether the charismatic leader is the president, the prime minister, the queen, or anybody else, even a rabbi or a rap singer. There is no excuse. And with that, let us all be guided so that when the time strikes, our moral compass is perfectly faced north. Shabbat shalom.